أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. First and foremost, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for granting us to see another month of Ramadan. We are on the 9th day of Ramadan today, and alhamdulillah we have a very exciting guest on the Haya podcast. But before we introduce this person, we just want to say that we hope that we inspire people today, and that the conversation that we have not only inspires people to give of themselves, but also to make the most of this month of Ramadan, inshallah. So without further ado, the person I'm going to introduce today is a business leader and has been part of the SANZAF family for many years. He is a tremendous personality, known to most of the staff and very loved by most of the staff members, alhamdulillah, known for his tough but fair rules. And he has allowed us also to engage, to gain many insights in terms of bolstering the way in which we deal with our intake of zakah, but also our distribution. So today I would like to introduce none other than our brother Showkat Mukadam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
So alhamdulillah, brother Showkat, it's very good to have you, and indeed an honor for me. It's our first time I'm actually having a conversation with you since I've joined the SANZAF team. But we know that every story where we are, SANZAF, we are celebrating our 50 years or 51st year this year, but every story has a beginning, a starting point. And I think that's where we want to start with you today, inshallah. So if you could tell us about the starting point for you with SANZAF. I'm sure you were a young man at the time, still a young man, but a much younger man at the time, and you completed your studies. It was a very difficult time period, for us as a country. So where was the starting point for you with SANZAF?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah rabbil alamin wa salatu wa salamu ala ashrafil mursaleen Sayyidina wa Nabiyana Maulana Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Jazakallah for this moment to record some of my experience over the years, really. Yes, obviously, going through high school and so on, I was at the boys' high school, Sibisbona. One always yearns to give back to the community, and I think that's a trajectory of any Muslim, really. The question really is, how much do you give, when do you give, and how do you give it in parts and so on. I was very firm in my thinking that as soon as my studies complete, I am very determined to give back to the community, really, time, as you rightly say. Obviously, in the older part days, and many of us forget these things, coming from the so-called Indian community, I had to trek to Durban to go and do my studies. You could not study at the University of Cape Town, and you could not study at the UWC for that matter, and hence my journey to the University of Westfield in Durban in '76, the year of the riots. And somehow, fortunately, through just an application, those days you made the application to the Minister of Home Affairs to be able to attend another university of another race group, really. And hence my journey started at University of Cape Town, really, in 1977, really. Obviously, I chose accounting as a career and was very clear about it. I'm sure my parents would have liked me to have become a doctor because I excelled in accounting, and I loved the topic so much at school, really. Believe it or not, I did quite well, and with the result that in 1981 I sat for what we call the Chartered Accountants exams, really, and those days you wrote it over 3 days, 4-hour papers, and in that year I actually passed the exams at the first sitting, really. And that immediately made time available, really, on my hands, and hence I was introduced by a mutual friend to Sheikh Faik, who was in at Old Mutual still, being employed, and he was the Imam at the Bridgetown Mosque. And I remember that occasion vividly because we lived in Rylands Road in Rylands, and he came to my house with my friend, and hence the start started there in the sense that I was very keen to add value to SANZAF, which was a very small organization, and that was the beginning of my involvement with Zakah Fund.
Alhamdulillah. So if you look at it, in terms of longevity, this year, alhamdulillah, we are going to feed over 50,000 families with fitra parcels. We're having 1 million warm meals that we're doing in the month of Ramadan. But as you mentioned, it was humble beginnings. It was a start in an office that was the size of a room, So in the beginning, what were some of those challenges that you faced, and how did you overcome them?
Look, I think when we start to do this kind of work, the challenges are there, but somehow when you do the work in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, those challenges are easily overcome. They may be seen as challenges really. I do recall Abdul Razak was the employee at that point in time. The office was in the Bridgetown Mosque, a small office of about 10 square meters. As you enter the mosque on the left-hand side, which I think possibly was the Imam's office really, and converted and so on really. And those were the humble beginnings. I do recall very clearly that Abdul Razak would at times walk the streets to distribute some food items. I couldn't say it was parcels really, because you weren't that well organized really. And similarly, we would then start approaching business houses to give items really, and it was nothing on the massive scale like that. I mean, the very first, obviously I was being an accountant, and Sheikh Faik made me treasurer immediately. Those of you know how accounting was those days. You used to write it up manually in those long green books, And the first year, we must have reported something like about 30,000 Rand for the whole of the Western Cape, really. And obviously, at the same time, or a year later, or maybe a year before that, there was this merger with Durban and Johannesburg, or Transvaal as it was known then. And I do recollect that I did the books for the consolidated period for that same year, and it wasn't more than 100,000 Rand recorded in that year. Remembering that the Zakah Fund started a few years before on its own, each region had its own sort of approach, and hence the founders found each other a year or two before I joined, and by that time I had met people like Brother Iqbal Sabat, Ahmed Said Mullah, Brother Dr. Showkat Mukadam, Karim Ghani, and Rashid Surti. So these were the stalwarts that we started with, and very much different to what happens these days. Those days when we used to meet, we stayed at each other's houses, really. I mean, I remember clearly that Brother Iqbal and particularly Ahmed Said Mullah would have stayed with me in Rylands Road and so on. It was just a different period of how people interacted and the love for each other, and nothing seems to be an obstacle, They were all sort of steps in the direction of growing this. We never knew, if you had to ask me, where would you have seen the Zakah Fund at that point in time, I would not have ever dreamt that we would have reached this kind of position that we are, even maybe 5 years later, what we did then, and so on. But the journey just carried on with more positives than negatives, really.
Yes, alhamdulillah. So in terms of that growth, what was that growth like, seeing it from the beginning, from something small, grow to what it is today?
I did a presentation at the national meeting in Durban, and the statistics overwhelms everyone, really, and it's never been sort of calculated formally. We just carried on doing the right work, and that's the important point, Don't be distracted for me. We had obstacles also. I mean, we had many obstacles, and we can talk about that in a few minutes. But the focus was that we were there to have codified a concept of zakah, institutionalized zakah, and to reach to people who are deserving and in need, really. And we just remained focused. We weren't distracted, really. And there were many distractions, from the ulama fraternity to challenges by community members and so on, really. We can talk about, there was a tribunal at one stage, I can't recall what year it was, which kept us busy with one of the employees complaining that we were favoring certain people. The MJC led that investigation and tribunal. It was many nights we used to meet in Belgravia Road to testify and all those kind of things. Then there was the Cape Accord a few years ago, yes, that also set us back, where the ulama condemned us for what we are really and so on. So these obstacles were in the way really, but alhamdulillah, serving the poor, giving them that, and remaining focused and unbiased. It's important the intention is right. Practically, it may not work as it should be, really, because that's life, you know. You tell staff how to handle people, the recipients and so on, and there are days they're off and so on. And no organization can ever claim they're a 100% perfect organization. Yes, in the nature of the work we do, so it is subjective. But coming back to the kind of growth, really. So for the 50 years that we're in existence, we collected and distributed 2.45 billion rand. 2.45 billion rand. Starting with 100,000 50 years ago, right? In 1 year now, we collect and distribute about 200 million rand, right? But this is the interesting stat. In the first 40 years, of our existence, we collected and distributed 750 million rand. But in the last 10 years, we collected and distributed 1.5 billion rand. So in the last 10 years, we did twice the figure that we did for the last 40 years. And inshallah, if the trajectory carries on, which I have set as a challenge to the team, my input for setting a challenge, in the next 5 years, we will collect and distribute at least 1 billion rand. So what we did in the first 40 years, we did twice as much in the last 10 years, and in the next 5 years, we will do 3/4 what we did in the last 10 years. And I think that's testament to a lot of facts, really.
Yes. Yes, indeed. I mean, can that growth also be attributed to things such as, you know, Zakah education and advocacy? Because we know that the Zakah Fund is synonymous with those types of trainings and seminars and workshops. Because having a chat as well with some of the other founding members, they said that at the beginning, no one knew about Zakah. They didn't know what Zakah was. You know, it wasn't something that was being a topic of discussion, even in the masajid. I mean, so now all the years later, you have a lot of people that are now paying their Zakah. And so what role does that Zakah advocacy still play today?
No, I think there's no doubt, you know, in the last 10 years particularly, we've gone on a campaign of the advocacy of the concept of Zakah and talking about it. Many organizations collect and distribute Zakah, and alhamdulillah, they all do good work, really. But very few teach in the concept of Zakah. Very few explain the concept of Zakah. And I think in SANZAF as a home, this is maybe more attributed to the fact that we have quite a few chartered accountants, because the concept of Zakah is about money. It's about money. Besides, and we can talk later on about the religious blessings and all those kind of things, but it's about numbers at the end of the day, and it's about accountability, really, because once you deal with numbers and money matters, you must be able to account, really. So I think the fact that there are so many chartered accountants in the stream over the years, and so many who have taken the cudgel of wanting to get to know this topic, there's no doubt that the South African Zakah Fund has made a tremendous impact in terms of educating people, conscientizing people of the concept of Zakah, really. And hence, I think that's a major contributing factor to the fact. And importantly, I think that when we, I mean, I'm part of the team that does presentation on the concept of zakah and how to calculate it. We do not sit there and advocate SANZAF is the platform. This is where you should be. We just teach and we teach and we teach and we tell the people, choose organization, start in your own family, look at those near to you, around you, and then assess organizations. And yes, we do tell them what SANZAF does and so on. But the purpose of our advocacy program has to be more that this is what zakah is about. This is how you go to calculate it really, and please go out and comply with this correctly.
Of course. But Alhamdulillah, I know we're speaking about zakah advocacy, we're speaking about the intake of zakah and so on. But in terms of distribution, and ensuring that it goes to the correct people, is there any stories that you can perhaps share with us that highlights that, or something that, because working in this industry is also very challenging, something that gives you that motivation and that inspiration?
Look, I think for me personally, I think the issue of zakah has been education, and by the ulama and that fraternity has been always from the spiritual benefit. Has always been the verses of the Quran, you must comply, if you don't comply, whatever. I see it more than that, and I think this is an area which I think we also need to expound a bit more. And I think it's more the transformative element of what the impact of zakah is. And people out there should stop making it just a calculation, really. For me, calculation is fairly easy. It's not a difficult concept. There are always challenging areas in our deen as to where there are different opinions. But think of zakah as a transformation in an economic view, already. And I want to spend a lot of my time in that area nowadays, really, that I bring that to the peoples. So when you pay zakah, besides this spiritual transformation or benefits you're going to get, you must have a strategy. Everyone out there, never mind how small you pay and how big you pay, you must have some kind of strategy to say, what is it my desire for this to be an impact, as opposed to doing a calculation and handing it over. And why do I say that? Because the concept of zakah is a very powerful tool.
Indeed.
Very powerful, very powerful. Why is it powerful? Because it's a tool of redistribution of wealth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His infinite wisdom must have known that there will be those who have more than what they should have and those who in need. It's actually a redistribution tool, really. And a lot of politicians talk about how do you redistribute wealth and so on, really. Here it's right in our hand. 2.5%, only 2.5%, you must give over to those who are in need. And there will always be those in need, really. Even those who have. And in Surah Tawbah, the second category says, those who have, but not enough, And I always say to people who come to me for advice, I always say, have you looked around your family? They may seem to be having enough to meet their daily needs, but there are other demands. For example, suddenly one of the children is qualified to go to university. They don't have 150,000 rand to pay the fees, but they have enough to live comfortably. So you can see even the verse has recognized the different categories in its wisdom to benefit from that. But coming back, it's a redistribution mechanism. Two, it helps the economy, because think about it. Those who receive zakah are not going to buy a motor vehicle with it. They're going to take care of their basic necessities, because that's what they're lacking. But if the basic necessities are sourced from a Muslim business owner, then the cycle goes.
Yes, it continues.
The cycle goes between. So in Islamic countries, this works very well. The one who needs it, receives it from an institution, he takes it and he spends it on basic necessities to the trader who buys his goods from the manufacturer, and everybody makes a markup on it, and hence everybody contributes that back to the Zakah pool, because they now must pay 2.5% of their surplus wealth, really. Then it's an investment mechanism, because when you place that funds in the hands of the recipient in a program of upliftment, that's an investment in the society.
True.
That's a beautiful investment in the society. When we invest in a child's education and so on, that's an investment in the society for the better of society in the long term, really. And as Maulana always says, we want those who have been receiving, they should eventually turn into givers, really. And these are all mechanisms. The other important point is that it encourages or it discourages people from hoarding money. And by hoarding money, you're going to pay 2.5%. Right? So let's just say you buy a car with your money. Now you're not having the money to pay Zakah on. But that car has gone into the economy, somebody manufactured the car, and hence, and so on and so on. The whole thing turns. Now, I think for too long, have people addressed this issue of, I want my religious duty completed, how do I calculate it? But this transformation or transformative impact in the economy is profound. And again, you know, it's very sad to say that a paper was presented at the seminar or a gathering last year. As you know, that in the South African context, all the Sharia compliant houses, such as banks and asset managers, they all have to report the figures to a central place which oversees them, really. And this seminar was a gathering of financial institutions, and one of the papers presented was how much wealth is with financial institutions, whether banks or asset managers, in a Sharia environment, in a Sharia compliant context. And guess what? The total in that group of institutions, the total is 65 billion rand.
And that's just South Africa.
That's just South Africa. And that's just Sharia institutions.
Yes.
Right. Now let's assume all those people who have those investments through those mechanisms will qualify to have the minimum nisab. Because the minimum nisab is 10,000, 12,000, somewhere there.
Yes.
So I think that's a fair assumption.
Of course.
And if you take 2.5% of 65 billion rand, you come to a figure of about 1.5 billion rand potentially that should be potential Zakah payable. South African National Zakah Fund only collects 200 million rand a year.
Okay.
But that's not all. Those are figures for those individuals who have aligned themselves with Sharia compliant institutions.
Yes.
What about those who are with non-Sharia compliant?
True.
That's not all. What about business houses that must work their Zakah calculation on assets other than money? They must work on stock.
Yes.
They must work on debtors, yes, correctly. They must take off their liabilities. So you can see how far we are from what we have to do and how much work we still have to do. But in turn, if you think about it, I guesstimate that if that is 1.3 billion rand, that this figure is easy somewhere in the 2 to 3 billion rand, taking into account the other categories. Now, if we can rally those to pay correctly and to take this principle very seriously, and if we can organize our resources and infrastructure in such a way, this Muslim community will benefit manifold. And those who are in need will be uplifted, and the impact on the society and the investment I spoke on will be profound. But coming specifically, that's an overall macro for me, the macro impact of our journey, really. Now, don't get it wrong that there are many other organizations that also collect and distribute. There are many individuals that do their own personal thing.
Yes.
You can multiply the 200 of SANZAF, because SANZAF is a leading organization in this area that accounts for it regularly. All that added together will never reach $750 million in my view. So there's still a lot of work to do, and the impact on society. However, coming down to individual cases, I mean, I don't have any specific cases, but I do meet people who will tell me that, you know, through the bursary scheme, through the trade training program and so on, they've done well. We see it in our offices. We see it in Durban with the hospitality program. We see it in Cape Town. I do remember very clearly, I mean, Abdul Razak and ourselves, we used to set up training classes for ladies for sewing.
Yes.
For sewing. It may have been in a garage. We would get the sewing machines. We would get fabric from Durban, and so on, really. But a lot of work still has to be done to transform the society, really. And I think it's when the giver applies his mind that what is his strategy, all right? And he looks at spending time on the strategy where his money is going to go, it will start having more serious impact, particularly the ones who are liable to give large amounts, really. I mean, one can understand the one who gives, 5,000, 10,000, he wants SANZAF to take the responsibility. But anybody north of 100,000 rand of contribution to any organization should always be inquiring, what is your strategy?
Of course.
How will this impact society, really, from that point of view?
No, most definitely. And I think something that's very important, having this discussion, giving monetary value is very important and is to fulfill your zakah, yes. But if you look at a lot of people and industry professionals such as yourself, giving of yourself and your own expertise is also crucial, in terms of improving in your organization, not just SANZAF. So what motivation would you give, to young professionals and people that are in their industries that can add value to SANZAF and the likes thereof?
Alhamdulillah, I think I always say this to people. The Muslim community in South Africa has been blessed with many skills, unbelievable skills. And I'm not talking about the conventional accountant and doctor and dentist and lawyer. Those were the famous categories, and maybe specialists. If you look at every area that we've gone into, you will find a Muslim person in an industry of knowledge. If you take asset management, there are a profound number of people in very high positions, really, very skilled people. If you take IT, people have gone into those areas unbelievably. If you take logistics, if you look at supply chain, the newer games, if you look at the analytics game, how, where, what for, and so on, we have a person skilled in every area, And this statement that I'm going to maybe expand on also applies not only to SANZAF, but to every other facet of our deen where people can play a role, really. So we have skills everywhere. You can ask yourself, what skill? We have mechanics, we have plumbers, we have tradesmen, you name it. You have IT repairers and all those kind of things. You've got people in doing astrophysics, and people are extracting gold. We have skilled engineers in different fields. We are a skilled community. What I think we lack is harnessing that skills. For any organization, and I think SANZAF lacks that. And more importantly, and for whatever reason, you won't believe it, but many people now retire historically because it's been in the system at the age of 60. I mean, I've got a friend who was a partner at Ernst & Young. He's 60 years old this year, and he's going to retire. I mean, those people have skills available.
Of course.
What we and other organizations are not doing is facilitating that process to make it easy for those people to come on board, to focus in a particular area. Are you with me? We don't call them, we don't rally for them, we don't make the infrastructure easy for them, are you with me, to work with, and so on. So I think my first point and call is really organizations must arrange a better process. Are you with me? That these people can add value. And I said to you, and I started at the beginning, I said to you, we, in this deen, if you're a Muslim, you always want to give.
Of course. Yes.
You know, it's an inner nature that we want to give. Except that sometimes you just need to make the call and you need to find that match. You need to find that match really. So, I mean, you know, many of us are on LinkedIn and I look at these professionals and we assume it's Muslims because they got Muslim names. You'll be surprised and shocked what kind of skills people are there from you know, strategists and all those kinds, and analytics people and so on. So I think the first thing I want to say to ourselves and to all organizations, really make it easy for them to make. The second thing I think, what would inspire people is that they want to be linked to institutions that have a good name, that has a good reputation. Are you with me? It doesn't matter with a small organization, that doesn't matter. Good name, good people at work, good reputation, and good governance, and transparency and accountability. If you have those ingredients, all right, go out and make that call. That will inspire people to come and get involved. Most people involved these days see things around them and they see what the impact they can make and so on. They have a desire to give. What we're not doing is making it easy to give, really. But one of the ingredients is those factors that I mentioned. And I do believe SANZAF qualifies in that respect, really, from that point of view. What SANZAF is not doing for me, in my humble opinion, is making that facilities available to match and find each other and make a call for that, you know. It's a big task to put together, but our community is skilled, really. Alhamdulillah.
So, I mean, you know, looking at it, 51 years in existence, your journey with SANZAF indeed has been, you know, alhamdulillah, a long one. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to have many more years. But other than the factors that you've just mentioned, you know, what was it that kept you at SANZAF, you know, and that kept you along this journey?
Yeah. Look, I think, alhamdulillah, I'm now 81, I'm now 44 years this year, inshallah, with SANZAF. I think when you go and join an organization like SANZAF, your journey has different goals as you carry on. Different goals. Are you with me? I would think the first 5 years I was so obsessed with time-based accounting and so on, and writing up the books and so on. Are you with me? The next 5 years your focus changes maybe, and the following 5 years and changes. But I also think one of the strengths of SANZAF has been the fact that no person could remain chairperson after 2 sessions. In other words, 4 to 5 years or 6 years, whatever the case is, you can't be remaining. We all go through that process, that I've been chairperson, I've been national treasurer and all those kind of things, so have others been. But no one person is a chairperson for life in SANZAF. That's documented in the constitution. So when you join SANZAF, there is no way you can dream of being the chairperson until you die. And that's not going to happen. You're going to have your 4 years or 6 years. And I have had the good fortune of working with good people over the years, stalwarts, as I would put it, in the community. People like Sheikh Faik Khamildin, people like Brother Iqbal Sabat, Brother Ahmed Said Mula, Dr. Showkat Token, the late Imam Hassan Solomons, the late Brother Yusuf Da Costa, all those people. There are others in Durban, Brother Abdul Karim from Johannesburg, and so on. And the benefit of having different chairpersons, and maybe I shouldn't say, I should also include Madam Fairuz Muhammad before I get into trouble. The point is, I think what it does, it brings a new dimension of a chairperson, and you reorientate your goals and your orientation with that person also. Okay, so there are times there was a religious focus, there was an accounting focus, then there was an IT focus, and so on. And this brings the richness out of you over the years, are you with me, as opposed to just saying, I'm going to remain the bookkeeper, an accountant here, and whatever the case is really. So to answer your question, I think for me, the journey has been in different parts, really. My latest focus is for us to reach everyone who's in need. I want us to reach them. I don't want them to reach us. I want us to reach them. We take it so for granted that we think they have the ability to reach us via internet, via transport, and no. The concept of an institutionalized concept of Zakah is to be able to make it easy to reach those in need. And we've not started with that journey. We've not started with that journey. That for me is my obsession. And the second part of my obsession right now for my journey is to make sure that those who give understand what the transformation impact can be, and that they start demanding that kind of thing and accountability in that area, especially those who have. And lastly, my final one is to close the gap on the gap that's a missing zakah that needs to be paid. We need to turn this into some kind of concept, and I've been thinking of it very hard. You know, I believe in some, and I don't have the knowledge, I believe in some countries, Islamic countries, they just freeze your bank account on a certain day and they take 2.5% of your wealth.
Yes.
Simple as that. And that's it. You don't have to worry. You give into the central government coffers and they run the zakah programs really. Then there is a concept of you are so diligent about your tax payment and your tax return, you know. It's that kind of process I want to look at, to see how do we achieve a greater compliance factor with the calculation. Yes, we're doing a lot. We're now taking the advocacy program to corporates, in-house to corporates and so on. We inshallah want to take it to the Muslim accountants, how to give it to their clients and so on. It's hard work. Our journey hasn't started yet.
Alhamdulillah. So just in closing, are there any last points that you want for any viewers that we have today that are watching? Just a take home that says everything that we've discussed today, which is of utmost importance. Yeah.
I think it's important to say to those out there that if you believe that you can play a role in any organization, those that you're comfortable with, and particularly SANZAF, you've got the skill set to take us to the next level of what we have in mind as our goal and our obsession. Please join us, really.
Alhamdulillah. So I think, alhamdulillah, that's all we have time for today. We say shukr on behalf of the SANZAF team for availing us the opportunity to have this time with you. And to everyone, alhamdulillah, that is listening today, there's lots of gems that we can take out of this. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. And don't forget that generosity feeds souls. Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.